The Remington rifle barked twice, sharp and decisive. 50 yards away, the lead rider jerked backward off his horse, dead before he hit the Wyoming dirt. Colton Westwood worked the lever, chambering another round with practiced efficiency. The brass casing ejected, glinting in the late afternoon sun as it arced through the air. "Last chance," Colton called out, his voice carrying across the windswept yard of the Westwood Ranch. "Ride away or join your friend." The two remaining riders exchanged glances. One reached for his pistol. Colton's third shot dropped him, the bullet punching through his chest. The last rider wheeled his horse and galloped away, dust billowing in his wake. At 45, Colton Westwood's hands were rock steady. War and hard living had engraved their story on his face, deep lines around cold blue eyes, a diagonal scar running from temple to jaw, souvenir from Antietam, where he'd served as an engineer for the Confederate Army. 15 years had passed since the war, but some battles never ended. He approached the fallen men cautiously, Winchester cradled in the crook of his arm. The first was already gone, eyes fixed on the vast Wyoming sky. The second gurgled blood, clinging to the remnants of life. "Who sent you?" Colton demanded, kneeling beside the dying man. "Hammond," the man sputtered, crimson bubbling from his lips. "Says, time's up." Marcus Hammond. The name tasted like bile. The banker had been trying to seize Colton's land for years. "I've got another week on that loan," Colton said, though he knew the dying man couldn't change that fact. The gunman managed a bloody smile before death claimed him. Methodically, Colton searched the bodies. In the pocket of the first man, his fingers closed around something cold and metallic, a silver pocket watch, intricately engraved. His breath caught as he turned it over. On the back, two initials were delicately etched. J.W. Jacob Westwood, his brother. Dead 5 years. The watch that should have been buried with him. Colton opened it. A delicate melody emerged, notes falling like raindrops in a mountain stream. He remembered Jacob crafting this watch, designing the tiny internal mechanisms with the same genius he applied to his engineering patents. "Only two in existence," Jacob had said, presenting one to Colton. "One for you, one for me." Yet here was Jacob's watch in the pocket of Hammond's hired gun. Colton snapped it shut, cutting off the haunting melody, and slipped it into his vest pocket alongside his own identical timepiece. He loaded the bodies over their horses and headed toward town. Hammond had just made his final mistake. Sheriff Frank Donnelly looked up as Colton entered Bitter Creek's jailhouse, spurs jingling against the wooden floor. Behind him, the bodies of Hammond's gunmen were draped over their horses. "Christ almighty, Westwood," Donnelly growled, reaching for his hat. "What the hell happened now?" "Hammond's men tried to collect early." Colton's voice was flat. "With bullets." Donnelly, a bull of a man with a Union cavalry mustache, scowled. A former Union major, he and Colton maintained an uneasy peace built on mutual respect and shared hardship. "3 men rode onto my property," Colton continued, "claimed Hammond wanted my land today, not when the loan's due. They drew first." Donnelly stepped outside to examine the bodies. The gathered townspeople murmured as he pulled back the canvas covering the first gunman. "Pete Rawlins," Donnelly said, recognizing Hammond's notorious triggerman. "And Tom Jessup, professional gun hands." "Found this on Rawlins," Colton said, producing Jacob's silver watch. Donnelly's brow furrowed. "That's supposed to mean something?" Doc Murphy pushed through the crowd. The elderly physician had treated both sides during the war and harbored no loyalties except to medicine. "That's Jacob's craftsmanship," Murphy said, reaching for the watch with reverent hands. "I'd recognize it anywhere. The inlay work on the casing, nobody did that like Jacob. My brother made 2 watches like this before Hammond burned his workshop to the ground with him inside," Colton explained, voice tight with controlled fury. "One for me, one for himself." Murphy opened it, and the delicate melody emerged. The internal music box, pure Jacob Westwood innovation. Hammond claimed my brother died in that fire, Colton said. So why does his hired gun have Jacob's watch? Donnelly shifted uncomfortably. That was 5 years ago, Westwood. The territorial magistrate ruled it an accident. Because Hammond bribed Judge Morgan to make it go away, Colton countered. Just like he's trying to buy every acre in this valley now that the railroad's coming. The argument might have escalated if not for the arrival of the evening stagecoach. It rattled down Bitter Creek's main street, the six-horse team kicking up dust as the driver expertly navigated the rutted road. When it stopped before the hotel, the driver helped down a sole passenger, a woman in a practical traveling suit of dark blue wool, her auburn hair pinned beneath a modest hat. She surveyed the gathered crowd with clear, intelligent eyes before collecting her leather satchel. No one would have thought twice about her arrival if not for what happened next. As she passed the gathering outside the sheriff's office, her reticule caught on a hitching post. It spilled open, and among the items that tumbled out was a silver pocket watch, identical to the one in Murphy's hands. The melody from Murphy's watch was still playing when the woman instinctively opened hers to check for damage. The same haunting tune emerged, the two watches creating an eerie harmony that silenced every voice in the street. Colton moved with the speed and precision of a mountain cat, Colt Navy revolver drawn and aimed before most men could blink. "Don't move," he ordered, voice cold as steel. "Where did you get that watch?" The woman raised her eyes to his, unflinching, despite the gun pointed at her midsection. "I'd advise you to holster that weapon, sir, before you make a grave mistake." There was something in her voice, authority wrapped in refinement, that gave Colton pause. "That watch belonged to my brother," he said, lowering his pistol slightly but not holstering it. "One of only two he ever made." The woman studied him, recognition dawning in her eyes. "You must be Colton Westwood." She glanced at the gathered crowd, then back to him. "My name is Catherine Morgan. We need to talk, Mr. Westwood, privately." The woman introduced herself as Catherine Morgan, widow of Judge Henry Morgan of Boston. They sat in the hotel's small dining room, the two silver watches side by side on the table between them. "My husband took his own life 3 months ago," she said, her composure remarkable given the subject. "He left a confession. 5 years ago, Marcus Hammond paid him $5,000 to dismiss a case involving the destruction of your brother's workshop." Colton's knuckles whitened around his whiskey glass. "Your husband let a murderer walk free?" "Yes." Catherine met his gaze unflinchingly. "After Henry's death, I found this watch among his possessions. It came with the bribe." "And you came all this way to what? Confess your husband's sins?" "To find justice," she replied sharply. "Hammond didn't stop with my husband. When rumors of the bribe began to circulate, he threatened to destroy Henry's reputation posthumously if I didn't surrender certain documents. When threats didn't work, he sent men." She rolled up her sleeve, revealing a puckered scar on her forearm. "I'm not unaccustomed to firearms, Mr. Westwood. My father owned mines in Montana. He believed daughters should know how to shoot as well as sons." Colton reassessed the woman before him. Her hands were too smooth for manual labor, but there was a strength in them and in her gaze that spoke of someone familiar with hardship. "There's more," she continued. "Before he died, Henry mentioned rumors that your brother's wife and son might have survived the fire." Colton went still, whiskey forgotten. "Elizabeth and Thomas are dead. I buried them." "Did you see the bodies?" Catherine asked bluntly. The question hit like a physical blow. The coffins had been sealed, the bodies supposedly too badly burned for viewing. "Hammond lied about everything else," Catherine said softly. "Why not about this?" Outside, thunder rolled across the Wyoming sky as a spring storm gathered. Inside, something equally powerful was building, a dangerous alliance forged in shared purpose. By morning, Bitter Creek buzzed with the news of Hammond's failed attempt on Colton's life. The banker himself remained conspicuously absent from town, holed up in his mansion on the hill overlooking the valley. Colton and Catherine established an uneasy alliance, neither fully trusting the other, but bound by common purpose. They began investigating Hammond's activities, piecing together a pattern of land seizures, threats, and mysterious accidents befalling those who opposed him. Walter Simmons, Colton's foreman and a former slave who'd fought for the Union, brought troubling news from town. He'd overheard Hammond's men at Maria Vasquez's cantina, drinking and talking too freely. Hammond's buying up all the loans from the Territorial Bank, Walter reported, removing his hat as he entered Colton's study. The morning sunlight glinted off the gray at his temples. Word is he's planning something big, railroads coming through the North Valley, and he wants all that land. My land, Colton growled. And the Miller's place, the Jorgensens, and the Suarez Ranch, Walter added. Anyone who won't sell gets foreclosed on, or worse. He's creating a monopoly, Catherine said, studying land records they'd obtained from a sympathetic clerk. Once the railroad arrives, he'll control all access. Everyone will have to pay Hammond to ship cattle or goods. Walter nodded grimly. Man's building himself a kingdom. Their planning session was interrupted by the distinctive crack of a Winchester rifle in the distance. Colton was on his feet instantly, grabbing his own rifle from the rack. Walter, north side. I'll take the south approach, he ordered, checking his ammunition. Mrs. Morgan, stay inside. Catherine pulled a small Smith & Wesson Model 3 from her pocket, checking the cylinder with practiced ease. I didn't come this far to hide, Mr. Westwood. Outside, 3 riders were approaching fast, Hammond's men by their bearing. Colton took position behind a water trough, Walter behind a stack of lumber. Catherine crouched near the barn door, her small revolver steady in her hands. The first shots came as the riders closed to 100 yards. Bullets thudded into wood and kicked up dirt. Colton's Winchester answered, the heavy .44-40 round dropping the lead rider. Walter fired his greener shotgun, the 12-gauge blast turning another rider's shoulder to red mist. The third veered toward the barn, toward Catherine. Mrs. Morgan, Colton shouted, working the lever of his Winchester. She didn't need his warning. Catherine fired 3 times in rapid succession, the .32 caliber rounds finding their mark. The rider slumped forward, then tumbled from his saddle. In the ringing silence that followed, Colton reevaluated the Boston widow. She reloaded with practiced ease, ejecting spent shells and inserting fresh cartridges. My father believed in practical education, she explained, catching his look. The brief battle left one of Hammond's men dead and 2 wounded. As Walter bound their injuries, one of them, a hard-faced man with a distinctive scar running through his left eyebrow, stared at Colton with unexpected intensity. Need to talk to you, he said, voice low. Alone. Colton dragged him away from the others, pressing his Bowie knife against the man's ribs. Talk fast. Name's Billy Miller. I worked for Hammond in '72. His eyes darted nervously. I was there the night your brother's shop burned. Colton's grip on the knife tightened. You helped kill Jacob. No. Listen to me, Miller gasped. Your brother wasn't supposed to be there. It was just meant to be the workshop, destroy his records, his patents. Hammond wanted the design for a new mining pump Jacob created. But Jacob was there. Miller nodded miserably. Working late. But Westwood, listen, your brother's wife and boy, they weren't in the fire. Colton's grip slackened. What? They escaped out the back. Hammond's been hunting them ever since. Last I heard, they were in San Fran. The crack of a Sharp's rifle cut off Miller's words. A red blossom appeared on his chest. He slumped forward into Colton's arms, eyes wide with surprise. Colton dove for cover, dragging Miller's body with him. More shots followed, the heavy .50-90 rounds kicking up dirt around them. Walter returned fire from the house, providing covering fire as Colton scrambled to safety. The hidden sniper melted away into the surrounding hills, but the message was clear. Hammond had ears everywhere, and he would kill to keep his secrets. The next day, Hammond made his move. Colton and Catherine were having lunch at Maria Vasquez's cantina when the banker entered, flanked by four men including Sheriff Donnelly. Hammond was a vision of frontier prosperity. Tailored suit, gold watch chain stretched across his vest, boots polished to a mirror shine. Only his eyes betrayed him, cold and calculating, like a rattlesnake sizing up prey. "Mr. Westwood," he announced loudly, ensuring everyone in the cantina could hear, "I've acquired your loan from the Territorial Bank. Payment in full is due immediately." Colton set down his fork. "I have until next Friday." Hammond smiled thinly. "The terms have changed. $5,000 by tomorrow noon, or the ranch is mine." He turned to Catherine. "Mrs. Morgan, what an unexpected pleasure. Boston society must be duller than I remembered if it drove you all the way to our humble town." Catherine smiled with glacial politeness. "I find the air cleaner here, Mr. Hammond. Fewer rats." Hammond's expression hardened. "Sheriff, if Mr. Westwood causes any more trouble, I trust you'll do your duty." Donnelly looked uncomfortable, fingering the star on his chest. "The law's the law, Hammond, but I don't take orders from you." Something flickered in Hammond's eyes, surprise at the sheriff's backbone. He recovered quickly. "Of course not, Sheriff. I'm merely a concerned citizen." After they departed, Catherine turned to Colton. "We need that money, or we lose our leverage." "I don't have $5,000, Colton said grimly. Catherine's fingers moved to her silver watch. "Perhaps we don't need it." She twisted the watch's stem in a peculiar sequence, pressed a hidden catch, and the casing popped open, revealing a compartment beneath the movement. From it, she extracted a folded document. "My husband's final gift. Proof Hammond bribed him to dismiss your brother's case." Colton examined the bank draft, Hammond's signature clear as day. "This proves he bribed a judge, but not that he killed Jacob." "It's a start," Catherine insisted, "and there's more." She handed him a telegram that had arrived that morning. "A boy named Thomas Westwood, age 10, departed San Francisco last week. He's coming here with a guardian." "Thomas," Colton whispered, "his nephew, alive." "Hammond will try to stop them," Catherine warned. "If the boy witnessed anything that night," Colton was already on his feet, "then we need to meet that stage before Hammond's men do." The next 3 days passed in tense preparation. Colton, Catherine, Walter, and a few trusted allies fortified the ranch. Doc Murphy smuggled in extra ammunition and medical supplies. Maria Vasquez provided information gleaned from conversations at her cantina. Word came that Hammond had hired 12 additional gunmen from as far as Cheyenne, a small army gathering to either take Colton's ranch or intercept Thomas's stagecoach. Catherine proved herself invaluable. Her strategic mind complemented Colton's tactical experience, and her determination never wavered. In quiet moments, as they cleaned weapons or studied maps, Colton found himself watching her, this Boston widow who had traveled across a continent seeking justice, who could shoot straight and face danger without flinching. "You should be afraid," he told her one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains gold and crimson. "I was afraid in Boston," she replied, "afraid of shadows and whispers and ruined reputations. Here the dangers are on us. A bullet doesn't pretend to be your friend before it kills you." The stage from San Francisco was due the following afternoon. Their plan was to intercept it at Cottonwood Pass, 15 miles west of town, before Hammond's men could set up an ambush. Walter and 2 trusted ranch hands would approach from the north, while Colton and Catherine would take the direct route. Doc Murphy would wait at a way station with fresh horses. But as dawn broke, Walter spotted a wagon approaching from the east. From town, not the Western Trail. Colton grabbed his spyglass. "It's Murphy's buggy," he said, confusion evident in his voice. As the buggy drew closer, Colton could make out three figures: Doc Murphy driving, a small boy beside him, and a woman in the back, her face obscured by a bonnet. "They weren't supposed to come through town," Catherine said, alarmed. "Hammond will know they're here." Something changed their plans. Colton was already moving, striding toward the approaching buggy with long steps. The buggy halted in the ranch yard. Murphy helped the woman down while the boy jumped from the seat with childish energy, despite the long journey. Colton stopped short, staring at the woman as she removed her bonnet. Elizabeth Westwood had aged in the 5 years since he'd seen her. Grief and hardship etched in the lines around her eyes. But there was no mistaking his brother's wife. "Hello, Colton," she said softly. The boy, Thomas, studied him with solemn eyes that were pure Jacob. "Are you my Uncle Colton? The one who builds bridges?" Colton knelt to the boy's level. "I used to build bridges. Now I raise cattle." His voice roughened. "You look like your father." Thomas nodded seriously. "Ma says I have his hands. Good for making things." Elizabeth stepped forward. "We couldn't wait for your men at the pass. Hammond has scouts watching all the roads. Murphy smuggled us in his medical wagon, claimed he was bringing in a woman about to deliver and her son." Murphy climbed down from the buggy, his aged face grim. "Hammond's men are everywhere, Colton. Word in town is he's making his move today. Brought in fighters from as far as Cheyenne." Elizabeth's eyes flashed with unexpected fire. "I didn't come here to hide, Colton. I came to testify. I saw Hammond and his men that night. I heard Hammond give the order to burn the workshop." "Elizabeth, I've been running for 5 years," she cut him off. "No more." Before Colton could argue further, a rider appeared on the ridge overlooking the ranch, a lookout for Hammond. The man turned his horse and galloped back toward town. "They'll come now," Walter said, checking his rifle. "All of them." Catherine approached Elizabeth, the two women sizing each other up before Catherine offered a small smile. "Mrs. Westwood, I believe you'll want to see this." She handed over the bank draft from her watch. Elizabeth studied it, then looked up with grim satisfaction. "Finally proof." Thomas tugged at Colton's sleeve. "Uncle Colton, I can help. Pa taught me things about his workshop, tricks with tools and black powder." Colton looked down at his nephew, seeing the determination in those young eyes. Perhaps there was more of Jacob in the boy than just his hands. "All right," he said. "Let's see what we can rig up." For the next 2 hours, under Thomas's surprisingly knowledgeable direction, they prepared defenses. The boy had indeed inherited his father's mechanical genius. Together with Walter, they created tripwires connected to shotgun shells, loaded with rock salt rather than buckshot, painful but not deadly. They dug hidden pits disguised with brush and prepared oil-soaked hay bales that could be lit to create smoke screens. "Pa was designing defenses for mines," Thomas explained as he carefully rigged a trip mechanism to stop claim jumpers. He showed me his drawings. By midday, they were as ready as they could be. Colton had positioned Catherine, Elizabeth, and Thomas in the stone root cellar, the most defensible position if the house was breached, though Catherine had argued fiercely against being relegated to safety. "I didn't come this far to hide underground," she had protested. "I need you to protect Elizabeth and Thomas," Colton had countered. "If Hammond gets past us, you're their last line of defense." She had reluctantly agreed, checking her revolver one final time before descending into the cellar. They came at midday, 20 riders led by Marcus Hammond himself, with Sheriff Donnelly reluctantly alongside. They spread out along the ridge overlooking the Westwood Ranch, a show of force meant to intimidate. Colton, Walter, and Murphy waited on the porch, rifles ready. Hammond rode forward, stopping 30 yards from the house. "Westwood, I've come to collect what's mine." "This land isn't yours, Hammond. Colton called back. Neither was my brother's life. Hammond's face darkened. I have legal papers saying otherwise. Sheriff, do your duty. Donnelly looked uncomfortable as he urged his horse forward. Colton, don't make this harder than it needs to be. I've got warrants for you and the Morgan woman, disturbing the peace, assaulting Hammond's men. We have evidence Hammond bribed Judge Morgan to dismiss the case against him, Colton called out, and a witness who saw him order the fire that killed Jacob Westwood. Lies, Hammond snarled, but Colton noted the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. The standoff might have continued if not for Elizabeth emerging from the cellar, ignoring Colton's orders to stay hidden. She walked into the porch, head high. Hammond went rigid in his saddle. Impossible, he whispered, loud enough for those nearby to hear. Hello, Marcus, Elizabeth said, her voice carrying across the yard. You look like you've seen a ghost. Mrs. Westwood, Sheriff Donnelly removed his hat in shock. We all thought that I died in the fire? That's what Hammond wanted everyone to believe. Elizabeth's voice was steady. I saw him that night, Sheriff. Him and his men. Hammond ordered them to burn the workshop with Jacob inside. Hammond's control slipped. Shoot them, he screamed at his men. Kill them all. Guns were drawn, but before they could fire, the first of Thomas's traps triggered. A tripwire yanked by a gunman's horse sent shotgun blasts of rock salt into the air, spooking mounts and throwing riders. More traps activated as horses stumbled into them. Explosions of dirt and noise rather than lethal force, but effective in creating chaos. In the confusion, Colton, Walter, and Doc Murphy opened fire, aiming for horses rather than riders when possible. Hammond's men scattered, seeking cover behind rocks and in ditches. Hammond himself was thrown when his horse reared. He scrambled behind a water trough, drawing his pistol. The gun battle intensified. Bullets thudded into the ranch house, while return fire from the defenders kept Hammond's men pinned down. Sheriff Donnelly took cover behind his fallen horse, unwilling to fire on either side as the situation deteriorated. Colton spotted a familiar face among Hammond's gunmen, another man who had been with Miller the night of the fire. He took aim and fired, striking the man in the shoulder. As the gunman fell, Colton vaulted the porch railing and sprinted toward him, dodging bullets with the instincts honed in the war. He dragged the wounded man behind a shed. Talk, he demanded, pressing his revolver to the man's head. What happened to Jacob? The truth. The gunman, face contorted with pain, looked past Colton with widening eyes. Colton spun just in time to see Hammond aiming at him. Two shots rang out simultaneously. Hammond's bullet grazed Colton's temple, but Catherine's shot from the cellar doorway struck Hammond in the chest. The banker staggered, clutching at the spreading crimson stain on his shirt. Kill them! Hammond screamed to his remaining men, blood flecking his lips. Kill them all! But his men were retreating, outmaneuvered and unwilling to die for Hammond's cause. As they fled, Hammond found himself alone, wounded and surrounded as Colton, Walter, and Catherine converged on him. Sheriff Donnelly approached cautiously, gun drawn but not aimed. Enough, Marcus. It's over. Hammond backed away, still clutching his bleeding chest. You're a fool, Donnelly. I own this valley. I own you. Not anymore, Donnelly said, resolve hardening his features. Mrs. Westwood's testimony changes everything. Cornered, Hammond played his final card. Jacob Westwood isn't dead, he snarled, the words silencing everyone. He survived the fire. Colton froze. You're lying. Hammond laughed, blood bubbling at the corner of his mouth. 5 years I've kept him. Cabin in the North Hills. Wanted his secrets. Designs worth a fortune. His eyes gleamed with malice. Should see what's left of him. Fire did its work. Broken body. Broken mind. Elizabeth made a small, wounded sound. Thomas emerged from the cellar, his young face pale but determined as he moved to his mother's side. You're under arrest, Hammond, Donnelly said, moving forward with handcuffs. No! Hammond raised his gun again, aiming at Elizabeth. "If I can't have this valley, no one." Multiple shots rang out. Hammond jerked as bullets from Colton, Catherine, and surprisingly, Sheriff Donnelly, struck him almost simultaneously. He collapsed to the dust, eyes wide with disbelief. In the ringing silence that followed, Hammond gasped his final words. "Should've killed you all years ago." Then Marcus Hammond, the would-be king of Bitter Creek Valley, was dead. The northern hills stretched barren and rocky, untouched by spring's gentle renewal. Colton led the way, Winchester ready, Catherine and Sheriff Donnelly flanking him. They had left Elizabeth and Thomas at the ranch under Walter's protection, despite Elizabeth's protests. "If Jacob is alive," Colton had told her gently, "we don't know what condition he's in. Let me find him first." Hammond's directions had been vague, a cabin in the North Hills, but one of his captured men had been more specific, hoping for leniency. The place was well hidden, tucked into a ravine, invisible until you were almost upon it. "Stay sharp," Colton warned as they approached. "Could be more of Hammond's men." The cabin appeared deserted, a tumble-down structure of rough-hewn logs, its single window covered with oilcloth. Colton approached the door cautiously, rifle ready. "Jacob," he called. "Jacob Westwood?" No answer came from within. With a nod to Donnelly and Catherine, Colton kicked open the door, rifle raised to fire. The stench hit him first. Unwashed body, human waste, infection. As his eyes adjusted to the gloom, he saw a figure huddled in the corner on a filthy pallet. A man, emaciated and filthy, chained to the wall by one ankle. His face was turned away, but Colton would have known those hands anywhere, despite the twisted fingers and burned scars. "My God," Catherine whispered behind him. "What did they do to him?" Colton approached slowly, kneeling beside the man. "Jacob, it's Colton." The man turned and Colton's heart nearly stopped. Jacob's face was a ruin of burned scars down one side. The ear melted away, the eye milky and blind. But the other eye, clear blue, Westwood blue, focused on him with sudden recognition. "Colton?" The voice was a rasp, unused for so long. "Real, or dreaming again?" "It's real, little brother," Colton said, throat tight. "I'm here to take you home." Jacob's one good eye filled with tears. "Elizabeth, Thomas, alive, safe, waiting for you." As Donnelly worked to break the chains, Colton examined his brother's injuries. Burns covered much of his body. Old fractures had healed poorly, and his hands, those magnificent, skilled hands, were mangled from Hammond's attempts to force him to recreate his designs. "Hammond?" Jacob asked. "Dead," Colton replied simply. Jacob nodded once. "Good." They fashioned a stretcher from blankets and poles, carrying Jacob gently down the hillside to where they left the wagon. As they settled him into the bed, cushioned with hay and blankets, Jacob clutched Colton's arm. "My watch," he whispered urgently. "Hammond took it. Need it." "I have it," Colton assured him, producing the silver timepiece. "Found it on one of Hammond's men." Jacob's mangled fingers closed around it with surprising strength. Inside, hidden compartment, like Catherine's. He looked at her with his good eye. "You found yours." Catherine nodded, surprised. "Henry kept it." "Knew he might," Jacob wheezed. "Insurance." With painstaking effort, Jacob manipulated his watch, pressing catches and turning the stem in a sequence similar to Catherine's. The back plate slid open, revealing a hidden space. Inside was a folded diagram, engineering schematics for a revolutionary water pump design. "Worth fortune," Jacob managed. "Railroad, mining companies, all need it." Colton understood. This was what Hammond had tortured Jacob for. A design that could extract water from depths previously impossible, essential for railroads crossing the desert and mines delving ever deeper. You hid it in plain sight, Catherine said with admiration. Jacob's mouth twisted in what might have been a smile. Hid everything. In plain sight. He looked at Colton. Family. Safe now? Yes, Colton promised. Safe now. In the weeks that followed, justice came to Bitter Creek. Hammond's empire crumbled as his crimes were exposed. The bank draft from Catherine's watch, combined with Elizabeth's testimony and evidence found in Hammond's office, revealed the full extent of his corruption. Jacob began the slow process of healing. Doc Murphy brought in a specialist from Denver who was cautiously optimistic. His body took terrible damage, the doctor explained, but his mind is intact. With time and care, the patents for Jacob's water pump design were filed in both brothers' names. 3 railroad companies and the largest mining operation in Colorado were already bidding for rights, offering sums that would secure the family's future for generations. Thomas flourished under his father's guidance, showing Jacob's genius for mechanics despite his youth. Elizabeth's quiet strength became the family's foundation as they rebuilt their lives. Sheriff Donnelly, his conscience awakened, became a fierce advocate for justice in Bitter Creek, rooting out the last of Hammond's corrupt influences. Catherine Morgan purchased land adjacent to the Westwood Ranch. Wyoming agrees with me, she told Colton as they rode the boundary between their properties one crisp morning. Boston seems like another lifetime ago. Colton studied her profile, seeing not just the determined widow who had arrived on the stagecoach, but a partner who had stood beside him when bullets flew. The land needs strong hands to work it, he said. I have strong hands, she replied, meeting his gaze. They were 2 broken people, forged by loss into something stronger. Not whole, perhaps, but enough for each other. That evening, as they sat on Colton's porch watching the sunset, the 2 silver watches rested side by side on the small table between them. Catherine opened hers and the melody began to play. Colton opened his, the identical tune joining in perfect harmony. From inside the house came the sound of Thomas's laughter as Jacob told him stories of the bridges his uncle had built during the war. Elizabeth's gentle voice added details, creating a moment of perfect contentment. To think, Catherine said softly, all of this began with a timepiece. Colton reached across the space between them, his weathered hand covering hers. Not just any timepiece, he said. The enemy's timepiece. The one thing Hammond thought would destroy us. Instead, it brought us together. In the distance, the first star appeared above the Wyoming mountains. Time continued its steady march forward, healing old wounds, creating new possibilities. The watches played their melody, no longer a lament for what was lost, but a celebration of what had been found. The silver pocket watch in Colton's pocket ticked steadily, marking not just time, but survival. The melody it played when opened was no longer a lament for what was lost, but a reminder of what had been found. In the hills surrounding Bitter Creek, spring brought new grass pushing through soil enriched by winter's rest. Life continuing, as it always did, finding its way through fire and pain towards something new.